everybody, and welcome to today's review of Cherry. It is the new film directed by the Russo brothers, starring Tom Holland and Ciara Bravo. The film is about an unnamed protagonist, played by Tom Holland, who enlists in the army and gets deployed to Iraq, where he witnesses a lot of horrific events. Upon his return to his hometown, we see him deal with post-traumatic stress disorder. In order to cope with this, he starts abusing drugs, eventually becoming addicted to heroin. In order to fund his addiction, he starts to rob banks, which leads him further down a path of self-destruction. This is the first film shot by the Russo brothers since Avengers Endgame, which turned out to be the highest grossing film of all time. Whoops, scratch that, make that second highest grossing film of all time. The film was shot here in Cleveland, and as a matter of fact, I was fortunate enough to land a gig as an extra on this film. However, all that I ended up doing was waiting in a hold room for 8 hours to be called onto set, which never happened. Oh well, a job's a job and I still got paid for it. Now, because of my involvement in this film, I was very excited to see the final product, but I was very surprised to see the initial response by the critics to this film. They pretty much panned it. However, upon watching this film, I understand where the issues lie. The very first thing I noticed about this film was that it suffered from pacing issues.
This film uses an excessive amount of slow motion.
Slow motion is usually used to enhance the dramatic effect of a certain scene, but the Russo brothers decided to employ that technique in so many scenes that made that technique feel very unwarranted. In addition to the slow motion in the first half of the film, I felt that the actors were delivering their dialogue in a way that felt methodical and very slow. I feel like that's also due to editing choices. If they were able to cut the film a little bit tighter, they could have easily saved themselves 30 to 40 minutes and the story could have progressed in a quicker manner. The biggest thing that this film is being criticized for, however, is the stylistic choices that are affecting the tone for the film as a whole. The film is adapted from a semi-autobiographical book by Nico Walker. Much like the novel, the film is separated into several parts, each one chronicling a specific point in this guy's life, from awkward teenager going all the way to bank robber. In the film, each time we enter a different episode, we clearly notice that the style changes. While I appreciate that the Russo brothers were trying to remain faithful to the novel, when they translated it to film, it just didn't work for me because I felt like I was watching two different films at once. The first half of the film felt like a teenage rom-com, very lighthearted, very funny occasionally, but then you get to the second half and it becomes much darker, much more serious. While I think I understand why the Russo brothers chose to shoot this film the way they did, the choices that they made, from different camera lenses to aspect ratios to tone, it felt like all those choices were made out of stylistic flair and not for a narrative purpose. The last issue I have with this film is the narration. Much like the book, the movie is told through a first-person perspective. Sometimes it's done through voiceover, sometimes the character goes as far as breaking the fourth wall and addressing the audience directly. This kind of reminded me of the film Jersey Boys. In that film, every character breaks the fourth wall every time they choose to narrate a certain part of the film. But here's the thing, they decided to use that kind of technique from start to finish. With Cherry, there was no consistency in it. In fact, in the second half of the film, there's hardly any narration at all. And that is the part of the film that worked best for me because that part didn't need any narration. The Russo brothers were able to tell a cohesive story just by showing what the character was going through instead of telling us flat out. And that allowed me to become more emotionally invested with the character and what he's going through. Now, I cannot say that this film was terrible like a lot of critics are saying, because it wasn't. In fact, I understand why the Russo brothers decided to make this film. This film is very personal to them. For one thing, it takes place in Cleveland, which is where they grew up. Also, it deals with the opioid epidemic, which is a very serious topic here in the Midwest. The thing that really made this film worthwhile was the acting. I feel like this is probably one of the best performances of Tom Holland's career. This was a very mature role for him, and it was incredibly demanding, both physically and emotionally. The guy had to lose 30 pounds, go through intense physical training, and the guy really had to go into the mindset of somebody struggling with drug addiction. In fact, a lot of the scenes that we see him using drugs were incredibly hard to watch. And not only was Tom fantastic, but the woman who played his wife, Ciara Bravo, she is very good. This film could have easily been over the top or seriously melodramatic, but she portrays a very complicated girl struggling with her own problems that the chemistry between the two of them is so well balanced, and they bring a lot of intensity and believability to this movie. I feel like this is one of those breakout roles similar to how Maria Bakalova did with the Borat subsequent film. It's gonna lead her to bigger and better opportunities in the future. So in a nutshell, while I feel like this film suffers greatly from disjointed tone and some questionable choices made by the directors, the acting is still superb, and I feel like it does a great job at showing an honest portrayal of drug addiction. So I'm gonna give Cherry a B-. Thanks for watching my review, ladies and gentlemen. I hope to see you again next time.